But on our panel now, our first panel, we have Catherine Tillman from the University of Notre Dame. You might have heard of that place. Archbishop Martin, who is the Archbishop here in the Archdiocese of Dublin, and who invited Notre Dame and the CSC to establish the Newman Centre for Faith and Reason here in Newman's University Church. And then our third panelist will be Adam Cronk, who is the head of what we would say over here in Ireland, the principal of La Lumiere School, which is in northern Indiana. And again, you might have heard of the great state of Indiana. Catherine Tillman, our readings as well will be readings suggested by and endorsed by our panelists. So with Catherine Tillman, we're starting with the exchange between Father Ted and Catherine.
Over 30 years.
Over
it's an interesting exchange.
Yes. Over 30 years. I was highly amused by her description of Father Ted in Lent when he had to give up the cigars, that he could be quite grumpy.
You didn't want to engage Ted just before Easter.
But
he was deep in his preparation.
Yeah. So Catherine, who is, unlike me anyway, and maybe you, is an expert on Newman. So she will guide us through the core ideas of Newman, because as well as the idea of university, which is really around the, as he said, the idea, or as we would say, the concept of university, he also wrote in greater depth then about how a university might actually be managed and organised, and the more nuts and bolts side of it. So she will explore what were the core ideas of Newman in terms of a university, and in a sense too how that informed the idea of the University of Notre Dame as Ted began to envisage it in the 1960s.
Right, and then we'll be turning to Archbishop Martin. Archbishop Martin, as you said, invited Notre Dame here 4 years ago to begin the Notre Dame Center for Faith and Reason. If you go visit him at Archbishop's house and go to his sitting room, there on the wall is a massive framed portrait of John Henry Newman. He is a deep lover of Newman and is existentially connected to the very concerns that Newman was addressing in his the idea of a university. That we have a young population in Ireland. It's a populace he's concerned get back in touch with and connect with a deeper sense of values in what they do and why they do it. It's been an economy that's been booming, busting and booming, but there is this ongoing sense that we need to reconnect to our deeper sense of who we are and what we are. His article that we're going to have folks read is a little bit more broad-based than just education, but in the final third, it really does address some of the same issues that we've been talking about. So we'll be asking him about his experience and his knowledge of the reality of education in Ireland today.
And it's a neat kind of segue, really, because you could say that the University of Notre Dame, and people are always over the side wanting to call it Notre Dame or Frenchify it.
Very classy.
Yes, because as I said, Notre Dame was founded in 1842, but then this great green tsunami of Irish immigrants swept across America and swept across Indiana as well, and dyed Notre Dame indelibly green, to the great discomfort of Father Soren, who wanted a more French type institution. But the Irish, 16 of our 17 presidents, including Father John Jenkins, have been either Irish-born or Irish-American, or identify as Irish-American.
Even Hesburgh is half Irish.
Yeah. Father Ted was very attached to his mother, as we all should be, but his mother was Irish. Father Hesburgh is a Luxembourgish name, if that's the right way to say it, but he was very keen on his mother, and in fact, Father Ted, as you know, had more honorary degrees than any person ever, I think, on the earth. But the one thing he didn't have was something which recognised the Irishness of his mother. And in that Irish kind of way, we were able to organise for Father Ted to be given a passport, an Irish passport. And he cried when he was given that by Enda Kenny, because it acknowledged his mother, who he saw as being fundamental, who's Irish. So Father Ted, despite that odd name, he should really have been called Father Ted or Hesburgh. But in terms of Dermot Martin, then, as Archbishop Martin, as you said, there are challenges in the Irish Church, and one of those is certainly in education, because there's a strong argument in Ireland to divest, but to divest from Catholic education, because the Catholic Church has, for historical reasons and very good reasons, because the Catholic Church provided education in Ireland when nobody else did, and that should never be forgotten. But there's a big change now, and Archbishop Martin has to negotiate that complicated challenge. But within that too, then Archbishop Martin has a very wide and universal, as a Catholic leader should, view of things, and he was very aware of the fact that the United States of America had to deal with a marketplace, if we might say that, of ideas of living in what we sometimes call a multicultural, better pluricultural a world, where America's had to deal with materialism, and maybe in Ireland we had a monopoly, Catholicism, and it was never really challenged. So now there's a really interesting possibility for the ideas from Notre Dame in America, not again in any cookie-cutter way, but maybe the American Church and Notre Dame has a longer experience of dealing with this, and there's something that we can learn from it.
Well, the American Church has always lived in a plurality and never been the dominant church in the culture, so that we've always had to deal with what it does mean to exist in a very complicated, multicultural, multi-religious world. And so we do have something to offer. Our experience lends us to be able to speak about what it means to bring a Catholic ethos without necessarily leading with a heavily religious foot. How do we underpin all education? In fact, we were talking the other day, the church does not require people to send their children to Catholic schools. What they require is parents make sure their kids are receiving a Catholic education. The secular subjects, the so-called secular subjects, taught in a Catholic worldview, with a Catholic Christian anthropological sense of the goodness of human beings, of the goodness of all creation. There are kinds of mindsets that don't require an overtly religious language to be able to engage the world on terms and about important issues that all people of goodwill will share.
Yeah. And then our third panelist is Adam Cronk, and Adam was actually our campus minister here in Dublin and did a fabulous job. And
I was just about to help Adam, and then I left, so sorry, Adam.
Yes, the shortest lived trustee of La Lumiere, or on the board of La Lumiere ever. But La Lumiere's loss is Dublin's gain, Gary. Had to say that, right?
You did, thank you.
But we can't really talk about education without having representatives from that world, people who have to try to put into practice, daily practice, the lofty ideals of St. John Henry Newman, and Adam performs that function. But I know that one of the things that Adam is really interested in is in our world now, which can be very shouty and very divided and very angry and very social media driven. Like a question that he often asks is, well, how do we disagree? How do we talk about things which divide us? How do you stop students getting angry with each other? How do you foster, in a sense, of community? And we have only suggested now, watching
The Social Dilemma.
The Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma, which manages not to mention at all that Netflix is also maybe part of the same game. That might be part of the problem rather than the solution. But anyway, let's not go there. But it's long, it's 90 minutes, and some of it's pretty lame in my opinion, especially the alleged reality bits of it. But it does pose that question around how invasive and intrusive social media has become, especially for born digital kind of Gen Z, as they're sometimes called.
And especially the way that it breaks down the trust between people, eliminates a sense of truth, and drives people to the edges, away from not just a political center, but a place where they can engage and speak with one another. I think Newman was very much concerned that a truly well-educated person be able to carry on discourse with other people, to be able to exchange ideas, even ideas they disagreed on, be able to argue about points without necessarily calling in the goodwill or the honesty of the person with whom they're engaging in dialogue. It's crucial in our world today that we refine the center, again, not politically, but in that sense of a place where men and women of goodwill can be, to kind of return a phrase that Newman used in a slightly different context, gentlemen can be gentle with one another, can care for one another, can give true, honest, and human regard to one another, while still debating, sometimes quite harshly, important points.
Yeah. But that is the duty and the task of a university as well, that ideas are contested and negotiated and argued about, and you have to, in the Catholic tradition, inform your conscience, but in the university you have to inform your intellect, and you can't just come in, as it were, with preformed ideas and not expect them to be challenged. Not that, you're going to force people to change their opinions or anything else, but there has to be that civility and that willingness to engage with ideas that sometimes rub up against or rub shoulders with your ideas. And the task of a university, and indeed the task of a school, is to do that. But Adam is somebody who's dealing with the complex and crucial world of forming young people.
Especially in his context, because it's a high school, it's a lot of day students, but it's also a boarding school. So he has night and day young men and women struggling to grow up and learn.
Yes, and in a COVID-19 world as well, which poses even more challenges, because the kind of